All right, I have something very exciting I want to share with you guys that I learned yesterday from my therapist. She asked me if I had ever heard of the drama triangle, and I had not, and I'm just blown away by it. We also talked about a couple situations that had come up for me last week that were upsetting for me, and we talked about the drama triangle and where I was a little bit of a rescuer. I have a little bit of rescuer in me. So let's have some fun with this, and I'll tell you what it means. Here's a diagram of the drama triangle, and you can just Google drama triangle and you will see that. And then the other one that she shared with me, and she sends me notes after our sessions. There's another one. It's called Stop the Drama. I will put the link to this Stop the Drama in the description, but it's also the drama triangle with more definitions. I don't know, is this focused or there we go. But I'm just going to go over it a little bit so you don't, and I will put the links in so you can look at those later separately. So, in general, we're all messed up to some extent. So, where are we messed up? Where do we play the victim, the rescuer, or the persecutor? Not just in our own life, but with other people. Like, an example of someone doing it themselves in their own mind would be, if you come down, say you didn't finish a project on time and you're like, I'm just so incompetent. Now you're persecuting yourself. Now you feel like a victim. And now you can save yourself by pushing away feelings of incompetence. It gets a little complicated, but I think some of these are more obvious in relationship. So I just want to kind of define them a little bit. So how people move around those triangles all the time, but the main thing about being in that triangle is that there is no accountability for any of these roles. There is a lack of self-accountability and blaming other people or abandoning ourselves to fix other people. It usually starts with how we were raised in our families, and so we go through life mostly as a victim, a rescuer, or a persecutor. So let's start with the rescuer first. A rescuer feels that they're only worthwhile when they're doing things for other people. If you need me, you won't leave me. The problem with that is they have no accountability for themselves. They don't even know what their needs are. They're constantly abandoning themselves. And an extreme case would be a codependent. But it could even be someone like you guys leaving a comment in one of my videos is like, don't feel sad. Trying to take away my feelings, not letting me have my feelings, or trying to save someone or rescue someone. I've done this so many times. Rescuers usually grow up in families where their dependency needs are not acknowledged. It's a psychological fact that we treat ourselves the way we were treated as children. The budding rescuer grows up in an environment where their needs are negated and so tend to treat themselves with the same degree of negligence that they experienced as children. Without permission to take care of themselves, their needs go underground and they turn instead to taking care of others. A rescuer often gains great satisfaction by identifying with their caretaking role. They are generally proud of what helpers and fixers they are. Often they are socially acclaimed, even rewarded, for what can be seen as selfless acts of caring. Behind it all is a magical belief that, said out loud, might sound like, if I take care of them long enough, then sooner or later they will take care of me, too. I think that's a subconscious belief, actually, often. But as we've already learned, this rarely happens. Now here, this is the important part. When we rescue the needy, we can't expect anything back. They can't even take care of themselves, much less be there for us. And I know people in relationships like this where they're with someone who's a borderline or an alcoholic or critical and controlling. And the rescuer is right there. But it can also be subtle. I have seen myself in rescuing moments where I'm aware that I'm rescuing someone. So it can be a big thing, like your whole relationship operates that way, or it can be little minute moments. Rescuers are oblivious to the crippling dependency they foster. I do rescuing when I try to reassure people, when I try to make their uncomfortable feelings go away, when I think I have to reassure them, you know. So that's how I feel it in myself. But I don't like helpless people. They really annoy me. But some people like helpless people. They want to feel needed. So this can really be a range, in my opinion. Rescuers are unaware of the disabling messages they send through their enabling interaction with others. The more they rescue, the less self-responsibility is taken by the ones they caretake. The less responsibility their charges take, the more they rescue. It's a downward spiral that often ends in disaster. It becomes the job of the rescuer to keep the other propped up, for their own good, of course. Having a victim, and the victim can be an alcoholic, or it can be, I would say my dad attracts rescuer women. He's not really a victim, he's just kind of bossy, but the women like to feel needed. He doesn't meet any of their needs, so I don't know if he's a victim or what he is, but definitely my mom was a rescuer, my stepmom is a rescuer. I grew up seeing rescuers as wives, you know? So the submissive woman can be an unhealthy woman because she's a rescuer. She could be someone who thinks her role is to cook and clean and keep her man happy. That's not what she really wants. She's operating from a rescuer position to feel needed. So some of this gets very, very tricky. The rescuer needs a victim to maintain the illusion of being one up and needless. I'm better than you and I have no needs. Kind of gives you a superiority complex even. It can. This means then that there will always be at least one person in every rescuer's life who is troubled, sick, fragile, inept, and therefore dependent upon them. If the rescuer's primary victim starts taking responsibility for themselves, the rescuer will either have to find a new victim or address their own shadow needs. So, how to tell if you're a rescuer is that you have people in your life that are troubled, sick, fragile, inept, and dependent upon you, and you get turned on by that. You don't let other people take responsibility for themselves. You prop them up. My brother likes women who need to be rescued, for example. He likes that. I don't mean to bring my family into it too much, but I'm just saying I've seen this. Authentic helpers, now, the way to get out of being a rescuer, there's a difference between rescuing, which is no accountability or responsibility in abdicating your own needs, and being an authentic helper, which is actually loving and caring. Authentic helpers act without expectations for reciprocation. They empower rather than disable those they serve. What they do will be done to encourage self-responsibility rather than promote dependency. If you're a true supporter, you believe the other can handle their own business. They trust the other has what it takes to see themselves through times of difficulty without they as rescuers needing to save them. However, the rescuers don't take responsibility for themselves at all. Instead, they do for others in an attempt to get validation or feel important as a way to foster dependency. Okay, so that was the rescuers. Now we are going to talk about persecutors. The persecutor as a main way of going through life is shame-based. Shame-based. I guess when I hear shame-based, I'm thinking of narcissists, so maybe they fall into this also. This role is most often taken on by someone who received overt mental and or physical abuse during their childhood. For survival's sake, they repress deep-seated feelings of worthlessness. Persecutors hide their pain behind a facade of indignant wrath and uncaring detachment. They may choose to emulate their primary childhood abuser, preferring to identify with those they see as having power and strength, rather than become the picked-on loser at the bottom of life's pile. Persecutors tend to adopt an attitude that says, "The world is hard and mean, only the ruthless survive, I'll be one of those." They become perpetrators. They protect themselves using authoritarian, controlling, and downright punishing methods. I would say that a lot of the manosphere guys are in this category because they're so angry. And I would say my brother is a little bit in this category, which is why I stopped talking to him. Domination becomes their most prevalent style of interaction. This means they must always be right. That's my brother for sure. He must always be right. Their methods include bullying, preaching, threatening, blaming, lecturing, interrogating, and outright attack. They believe in getting even, every often through aggressive acts. The rescuer needs someone to fix, and the persecutor needs someone to blame. Rescuers deny their needs, and persecutors deny their vulnerability. Their greatest fear is powerlessness. Because they judge their own inadequacy, fear, and vulnerability, it's repressed and pushed down, they need someplace else to project these disowned feelings. They need a victim. They need someone to perceive as weak to prove to themselves that their own painful story about the world is true. Both rescuers and persecutors unconsciously need a victim in order to sustain their idea of who they are and what the world is like. I think that when they suppress their own vulnerability, then they have to hate anyone who is vulnerable, because it's your shadow now. It's your shadow. It's your wounded part. Now, they give some samples, which I'm not going to go through, but a persecutor is always ready for the next attack. But persecutors are not bad. They're simply wounded individuals who see the world as dangerous. They live in constant defensive reaction. They do not see themselves as persecutors. They really believe that they have to protect themselves from the world. It can feel very threatening for someone stuck in persecutor consciousness to get really honest with themselves. To do so feels like blaming themselves, which only intensifies their internal condemnation. Now, the persecutors need a situation or person they can blame so they can stay angry, because anger acts as a fuel to energize them. By the way, Eckhart Tolle, sometimes, I think it was Eckhart Tolle, talks about how anger can energize people. It's like a caffeine or a drug. You feel so self-righteous, you feel so angry, there's this energy about it. But anger may be the only way they have of dealing with chronic depression. Persecutors often need a jolt of rage, the same way other people depend on a shot of caffeine. The only way to get off the victim grid for the persecutor is to take self-accountability. There has to be some kind of breakthrough for them to own their part. Unfortunately, because of their great reluctance to do so, it may have to come in the form of a crisis. They have to be willing to, something has to happen in their life where they're finally willing to perceive themselves as the bad guy. They have to sit with the discomfort of being perceived as the bad guy. Now, we will talk about the victim. The victim has accepted a definition of themselves that says that they are intrinsically damaged and incapable. They project an attitude of being weak, fragile, or not smart enough. Basically, I can't do it by myself. Their greatest fear is that they won't make it. That anxiety forces them to be always on the lookout for someone stronger or more capable to take care of them. Victims deny both their problem-solving abilities and their potential for self-generated power. They see themselves as inept at handling life. Feeling done in by, at the mercy of, mistreated, intrinsically defective, or wrong, they see themselves as broken and unfixable. As much as they insist on being taken care of by their primary rescuers, they nonetheless do not appreciate being reminded of their inadequacy. The very thing a rescuer needs, which is validation and appreciation, is the thing victims most resent giving, because it reminds them of their own deficiencies. Instead, they resent the help that is given. So, a rescuer tries to help the victim, and the victim gets argumentative and argues because they don't really like to acknowledge that they're acting helpless. Convinced of their intrinsic incompetence, victims live in a perpetual shame spiral, often leading to self-abuse, abuse of drugs, alcohol, food, gambling, and out-of-control spending are just a few of the self-defeating behaviors practiced by victims. Those in primary victim roles must learn to assume responsibility for themselves and initiate self-care, rather than look outside themselves for a savior. They must challenge the ingrained belief that they can't take care of themselves. Instead of seeing themselves as powerless, they must acknowledge their problem-solving as well as their leadership capabilities. When I hear the word powerless, I'm reminded of the 12-step meetings, and I think step 1 is bullshit. No one is powerless. We all have choices. If you can't handle your alcohol because you can't stop after the first drink, don't drink. But you're not powerless. You chose to pick up every glass. You chose to go gambling. You chose to take every drug. You chose it. Nobody made you. Nobody's powerless. But sometimes we feel powerless. And I certainly felt powerless. I think that's why I had such a hard time forgiving my ex-husband. I felt so wronged. I couldn't see that I chose to stay, or that I had the power to leave, or that I had the power to speak up. Like, I just didn't know. It never occurred to me. I didn't know what to do. That's why these YouTube videos are good and these trauma grids are good. So people can now get out of ruts that they're in and figure out, I'm unhappy, what's going on, and get these insights, And that's why I make videos like this, because I'm just so excited about stuff. I just want to share it with the world, although my audience is not the world by any means. But, all this information is out there for people to get out of their bad relationships, not by leaving the relationship necessarily, by getting out of their negative patterns and taking full accountability. Okay, now I'm going to summarize all 3 again. We're going to talk about the story. This is going to be shorter. The rescuers believe that their needs are unimportant and irrelevant, Every time I rescue you, I'm abandoning myself. And I know when I do it, I do it in conversations with people, just with random people, okay? I'm not in relationships, but I notice that I'm trying to make someone else feel more comfortable by what I say. I feel responsible for how they feel. Put it that way. Sometimes I get that I'm responsible for making you feel better. That's an example that I have in myself for being a rescuer, just in a conversation with people. Or I might say, well, it's okay that you feel that way. Or, yeah, I can relate to that, but I'm trying to rescue a moment, an uncomfortable moment. So that's my own stuff. Rescuers believe that their needs are unimportant or irrelevant, or I think that you can't handle what's happening, so I have to rescue you emotionally, for example. This means that, but I think we're talking here about rescuers who actually are in codependent relationships, which is a hellhole I will not get into. Rescuers believe that their needs are unimportant and are irrelevant. This means that the only way they can legitimately connect with others, feel valued, and have their needs met is through the back door of caretaking. Rescuers chastise themselves when they aren't caretaking others. Their story is, if I take care of others well enough and long enough, then I will be fulfilled. It's the only way to be loved. Unfortunately, rescuers are involved with lifetime victims who have no idea of how to be there for them. This reinforces the rescuer's story that says they shouldn't be needy, which then produces more shame and deeper denial surrounding their own needs. Absolutely. You're in a relationship with someone who's needy, they can't give you anything, and that reinforces your belief that you're just too damn needy and that you shouldn't need anything at all. And you more and more deny your own needs. So rescuers have to get in touch with their needs. They probably have needs shame around their own needs. And so instead of meeting their own needs, they meet the needs of other people, which is inauthentic, it doesn't work, and it's a lack of accountability and responsibility to self and to the other, because it's treating the other as incompetent and incapable, which is drama and toxic. Now, the victim, and I have been in the victim role. I've been in all roles, okay? I have, and we all have. I'm not picking on you, okay? I've seen these in my family. Okay, the victim story. Guilt and shame are the driving forces for the perpetuation of the triangle. Guilt is often used by victims in an effort to manipulate their rescuers into taking care of them. If you don't do it, who will? I've even heard people say, if you leave me, I'll hurt myself. The victim story says they can't make it on their own, and they prove it to themselves over and over again. They believe that they are innately defective and incapable, and they spend their lives on the lookout for someone to save them. Though this is what they feel they must have, they are simultaneously angry at their rescuers because they feel put down and looked down on by their caretakers. They're not even grateful. These damn victims. I have a friend who has borderline personality disorder, and that person's spouse, that I'm going to say that person's the victim, and the spouse would be the rescuer. And the victim is never grateful. The victim is perpetually angry. Yes. I don't know how these people are going to resolve their relationship. Some of these things go way deep. Okay, now we go on to the person. Well, let's see. Let me admit where I've been the victim. I'm not really in touch with where I've been the victim as a relationship role, but I have felt powerless in relationship. I felt helpless in my marriage. At the end, I felt like powerless and helpless, and I probably did act like a victim, but I didn't think I was defective, and I wasn't looking for someone to save me. So this is something I'm going to explore more with my therapist in the next session. Persecutor. Maybe when I do my rant videos, I'm a persecutor. I don't know. The persecutor The persecutor believes the world is dangerous. They use fear and intimidation as tools for keeping others in their place. What they don't see is how their methods for providing their safety end up proving to them that life is indeed as dangerous as they believe it to be. Their story says they're innocent bystanders in a dangerous world where others are always out to hurt them. It's survival of the fittest, and their only chance is to strike first. This story keeps them in a perpetual defense-offensive mode. Now, for all three of these roles, when there's a lack of personal responsibility, whenever we fail to take responsibility for ourselves, we end up on the triangle. Not even rescuers who pride themselves on being responsible take responsibility for themselves. They take care of everyone else, but have no idea of how to do it for themselves. Not taking responsibility is a key identifying factor in recognizing when we are on the triangle. So, rescuers take care of other people, persecutors blame others, and victims look for someone else to take responsibility for them. Not one of the three roles takes responsibility for themselves. Okay, so let's review this. The victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer, none of them are taking responsibility for themselves. There is a lack of personal responsibility. And one of the main things I talked about in the parenting book is responsibility and freedom go together. We are all responsible for ourselves. The victim says, I'm not responsible, you take care of me. The rescuer says, I'm not responsible for me, I'm going to be responsible for you and fix you. And the persecutor says, what does the persecutor say? I'm not responsible for myself. You're responsible for my misery. So the victim says, take care of me. The persecutor says, you're responsible for my problems. And the rescuer says, I'm responsible for you. No one's taking responsibility here. But we go through life not even thinking, am I feeling responsible for myself in this moment? I feel responsible for you, or I'm blaming you, or I want to be taken care of. So it's about start to recognize when you're feeling responsible for yourself versus responsible for other people. And a common question in the parenting book when it comes to finding out who's responsible is to ask who has the problem. So if someone else has the problem, just be there as support and encouragement. You don't have to fix their problem. Now, another thing that comes up around all of these three unhealthy roles is painful beliefs. Unhealthy beliefs about ourselves and the world instilled in childhood become rigid rules that may need to be violated. Family dictums like don't talk about it, don't share feelings, or it's selfish to take care of yourself will set you up to be in one of these three roles. You have to challenge these beliefs that have ruled you. You can expect and celebrate uncomfortable feelings. They will come up as you start to free yourselves from these traps of this triangle. For me, it's going to mean when I see someone who is struggling with an uncomfortable feeling, it's going to mean letting them have it and being with my discomfort about seeing them uncomfortable. That's what it's going to mean for me. Sometimes we simply need to sit with an uncomfortable feeling without acting on it. If you feel guilty, it doesn't mean you did something wrong. It can just mean you've broken with a dysfunctional family dynamic. The other thing to consider is painful feelings. So many people were raised that their feelings were not valid. They were punished for having feelings or dismissed or pushed away. So that's work I think that every human has to do, is to start acknowledging our feelings, because when we don't acknowledge our feelings, we push them down and they come out in twisted ways. Thoughts can trigger feelings, and that makes us react in a way that puts us on the triangle. So often we're trying to get rid of a painful feeling or control it so we can feel better. And by doing that, we're on the triangle. Like, I might be uncomfortable seeing you sad, and now I become a rescuer, you know? Or I might be angry that you're helpless, and I might bully you, or because I'm uncomfortable with my anger, so now I have to project it onto you. So sometimes I don't mean to get complicated, but the main thing is to start acknowledge your own feelings and your own needs. That's a good starting point. Take responsibility. This is how I feel. This is what I need, instead of trying to rescue other people or blame other people. It's kind of a good starting point. Now, we may rescue others as a way of both keeping ourselves and them from feeling bad. This is what I do. Busted! Charizard is busted! We tell ourselves things like, she can't handle it. He can't handle it. My recent situation came about from where someone was in an uncomfortable situation, and I thought, this person can't handle it. This will hurt his or her feelings. So I will try to make it better, and I went into rescue mode automatically. And I ended up just feeling angry at myself because I didn't even realize what I was doing, but now I do. We may notice that we feel better when we're fixing someone else. It gives us a false sense of being in control, which feels temporarily empowering. I hate to admit that it did feel empowering. I felt like I was the good guy here. But really I was, being a rescuer or something. We may fail to recognize that our increased sense of power is often at the expense of the other, leaving them disempowered. Because it's better to say, I'm really uncomfortable at this moment. However, I know you can handle this. I trust you to handle your feelings about this. That's what I need to start doing. Trusting other people to handle the feelings they have about something, or the way that they feel about something, or whatever they're going through. I need to start saying, you got this. The way I did when my kids were little. I just have to start doing it with adults. Another thing we do, and this is like a hat tip to Sunbox, because she says men don't want to hear women's opinions, and a lot of times women won't give their opinions, or others maybe. We may attempt to manage the emotional affairs of others by keeping our opinions to ourselves. However, we may also keep our opinions, feelings, and thoughts hidden, even from ourselves, not just from other people. We may push them down so fast a feeling comes up. For example, people who don't like anger, because anger, a lot of people are uncomfortable with anger because they saw anger, their parents were angry, so they never want to show anger, or they grew up in a household where anger wasn't allowed, and so they're very uncomfortable with anger. They don't let themselves feel angry. My ex-husband was like that. Whenever he was angry, he would just push it down. He wouldn't come to me and say, Sharzan, I'm really upset about this. We need to talk about this. He wouldn't even know when he was upset about his job or anything. He would just push it down, no matter what he was upset at, the neighbors or the job or the economy or me or anything. Just push it down, and he would get more and more resentful. He didn't know why, and he would just start walking around feeling so resentful, because anger was never allowed in his home. Now, he didn't project it onto others. It just kind of came out in the way he treated me in the bedroom, if you read my book, The Fuck List. But in this example they gave here, this woman didn't allow herself to feel anger, so she pushed it down, but she would project anger onto the slightest little thing. Whenever her husband made a little comment, she perceived it as anger, because she was projecting her own anger onto him even when it wasn't there. Keeping our opinions, feelings, and thoughts hidden can cost us our own well-being, and it's a barrier to intimacy. Now, when we deny our feelings, we set ourselves up for a victim perspective. Feelings are real. They're energy in motion. I always talk about how feelings are in the body. They're energy in motion. When we discount or undermine our emotions, we end up overtaken by them, becoming impulsive reactors. We cannot take responsibility for ourselves when we refuse to acknowledge our feelings, which means that these disavowed inner tyrants will go on driving our behavior from behind the scenes. So important. Full accountability and full responsibility means I am in touch with my needs, I'm in touch with my feelings. I take responsibility for them. Therefore, I don't need you to take care of them. I don't need to leave myself to take care of you, and I don't need to blame you. That's called radical responsibility. It doesn't sound very sexy or hot, but it's so yummy to be with people who act like this. That's why I like my therapist, because she's done all the stuff, and I want to be really powerful like that too. And you know what? My therapist is encouraging me to not give up on a relationship. She says it's so important to be open and to remain interdependent. But right now I'm super discouraged. But all I can do right now is work on my own stuff and make these videos, which I'm having super fun making. By the way, notice I'm dressed very modestly. I do believe in dressing modestly. Anyway, parents who never learned that feelings follow thought and who grew up without permission to acknowledge or express feelings often deny their children the same right. And so many of us were raised that children were to be seen and not heard, that we weren't allowed to have emotions, and our parents were uncomfortable with them. They may have decided early on in life that certain feelings are wrong or bad, especially anger or sadness or jealousy, whatever. So they deny and repress them without examining the ruling thoughts behind them. Telling ourselves that our feelings are unacceptable does not make them go away. So as long as we continue to attach beliefs to painful stories about ourselves and others, we will go on generating these same negative feelings. These suppressed, denied emotions become secret pockets of shame within the psyche. They only serve to alienate ourselves from others. Sometimes we deny feelings in an ill-fated attempt to avoid feeling bad. We tell ourselves we can't handle our feelings, they're too much, so that we don't know where these feelings come from, what to do about it, so it's better to stay away from these messy inner states. But when we know that it's our thoughts that produce painful feelings, that indeed our unhappy feelings act as gateways into greater understanding of ourselves. Our thoughts lead to feelings, but as I also talk about, our feelings are also indicators that something isn't wrong. Someone is violating a boundary, someone isn't treating us right. So feelings can be an indication that someone is treating you in a disrespectful way, but it can also come from a limiting belief. So that's where you have to ask yourself what type it is. Until we recognize these simple truths, we may go on trying to escape pain using various suppression techniques. The outcome is suffering and misery. Getting honest with ourselves is the most basic requirement for getting off the triangle. You cannot get off the triangle without self-honesty. When feelings are denied, honesty is impossible. Remember that denial comes out of negative self-judgment. If we have decided on some level that we cannot accept our thoughts, behavior, or feelings, then we will not be able to admit we have them. It's too painful to admit something about ourselves that we have judged as unacceptable. We must practice self-acceptance if we're truly going to be able to be honest with ourselves and others. So just to start to accept all the flawed, messy parts of who you are, because we all have them. And a lot of it wasn't your fault. All your messy parts are just because of how you were raised. Just acknowledge them and love them and just be honest. And that can be scary for people. I do not know if I have a limit on my YouTube videos. I need to read a little faster maybe. In order for a rescuer to get honest, they have to confess their previously unconscious need to keep others dependent on them. They have to admit that being a rescuer is what they do to get their own self-worth met. As long as the rescuer sees the other as a weak, ineffectual, and inept victim, they will continue to deceive themselves that they must be the fixer and caretaker. In the same way, a persecutor is being dishonest when they insist on blaming others for their misery and suffering. As long as they insist on seeing themselves as blameless, innocent bystanders who have been unjustly treated, they will remain on the triangle. In order for a victim to get off the triangle, they must confess their investment in staying little, i.e. dependent and needy. This means getting honest about how they manipulate others, using a self-deprecating story of ineptness in order to get taken care of. Living in reality requires truth. We must first know what truth is. When we react out of denied feelings and unconscious programming, we cannot possibly know our personal truth. As long as we're not in touch with reality, there will be hidden agendas and dishonesty. This is another primary trait of all players on the triangle. Only by knowing our truth can we begin to speak from a place of personal integrity. Then exiting the triangle becomes possible. And then the final part is about projection. When we deny feelings and beliefs that we have judged as negative or unacceptable, we rescue ourselves by pushing these unacceptable parts into the dark unconscious. They don't stay there, however. Whatever thoughts and feelings we don't own or take responsibility for, you guys, will end up being projected out into our world, usually on someone we love. As soon as we judge some thought or feeling within us as unacceptable, we will unconsciously look around and find someone who has those same traits and hate them for it. That's the guys who leave hateful comments on my channel. They're projecting. Actually, I know that's what they're doing. This is called projection as a propelling force on the triangle. Projection ensures that the victim dance continues. Whew, that was a mouthful. I hope you guys enjoyed this video so much. And I'm interested in hearing your comments. I'm curious if any of you have ever heard of this triangle, the victim triangle or the drama triangle. And thank you for watching my video.